I wish I could say I waited until he was gone, but I did not. The truth is, my husband was still alive, barely, but breathing, when I laid in another man's arms. That night, I left Tony's bedside and went to Jeremy's house under the excuse of needing a shower and clean clothes. I came back with red eyes, trembling hands, and a lie on my lips. Tony asked me where I had been. I told him I went to the pharmacy. He smiled faintly, but his eyes, they told me he knew something, and I hated myself for it. He was dying, and I still betrayed him. But what no one tells you is that grief does not always wait for death. Sometimes it comes early. Sometimes it wraps its hands around your throat and squeezes until you are no longer yourself. Until you do the unthinkable. And I did. But what happened after? That was worse. Before I go on, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to this channel. You are the reason stories like this are told. And to all the amazing new and returning viewers who are yet to subscribe, I truly appreciate you being here. I hope you will hit that subscribe button right now. It means the world to me, and it is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. Do not forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I would love to know how this story made you feel. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. My name is Ruth. I live in Montgomery, Alabama. I am 50 years old, and for the past 2 years, I have been watching my husband Tony die in slow motion. Tony was 58 when he got diagnosed with ALS, one of those cruel diseases that does not just take your life, it takes it inch by inch, month by month. First, it took his strength, then his balance, then his voice. It was like watching the man I loved being erased piece by piece while he was still in front of me. I loved Tony. I still do. But love, I have learned, is not always enough to keep your heart from falling apart. For months, I lived in hospitals and clinics. I stopped working. I stopped living. I was not Ruth anymore. I was a full-time caretaker, nurse, house manager, grief sponge. I would cry in the shower, cry while folding laundry, cry when I looked at old photos. I was crying before death even came. And I was angry, so angry. And then came Jeremy. Jeremy was Tony's friend from college. He lived just 20 minutes away and would drop by to visit every few weeks. He was kind and soft-spoken and had this way of looking at me that made me feel like a woman again, like someone who still existed outside the role of wife and caretaker. One night, Tony had one of his episodes. He choked on his own saliva, and I had to call the nurse at 2 a.m. I was shaking. After they stabilized him, I left to get some air. I called Jeremy, crying. He told me to come over. I told myself it was just a talk, that I needed to breathe, that I would return before Tony even noticed. I left that house 2 hours later. Different. The shame hit me the moment I got into my car. The tears came before I even turned the ignition. And when I returned home, Tony was awake. His head turned slowly, and he asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Where did you go?" "Pharmacy," I said. He stared for a second too long. Then he smiled. But it was not a smile. It was a goodbye. The days after that night felt like walking on broken glass barefoot. Tony barely spoke, but when he did, it was as though every word carried a shadow. He would look at me sometimes with that soft, faraway stare, like he was seeing me from a distance, like I had already left him, even though my body was right there beside his. I convinced myself that he did not know, that maybe it was the disease making me read too much into his expressions. But deep down, I felt something had shifted. And Jeremy? He changed too. He stopped answering my texts, stopped returning my calls. The same man who told me I deserved comfort, who held me like I was breaking apart, was now avoiding me like I was a stain he could not scrub off. I started to spiral. One night, I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, holding a bottle of Tony's medication in my hand, not out of any dark intention, but because I simply did not know what else to hold. My hands needed to grasp something. Anything. I was falling apart quietly in the corners of our home, while trying to hold Tony's life together. That week, Tony's breathing worsened. He had trouble swallowing and started sleeping more. Hospice was called. The nurse told me we were close. I sat beside his bed, day and night. I brushed his hair, held his hand, read him scripture even when I was not sure he could hear me. One evening, while the sky outside burned gold and pink, Tony turned his head to me slowly and whispered something I would never forget. "Did he make you feel alive?" I froze. I looked into his face and saw no anger, only sadness. "Tony," I choked, reaching for his hand. He closed his eyes. "That is all I wanted," he murmured. "For you to keep feeling alive." And then he slept. That was the last full sentence he ever spoke to me. He passed 3 days later, peacefully, they said. But peace was the one thing I did not feel. As I packed his things, sorted the funeral arrangements, and accepted the condolences of family and neighbors who had no idea about the storm inside me, I came across a sealed envelope with my name on it, placed in the top drawer of his dresser. His handwriting. I sat on our bed and opened it, hands trembling like leaves in the wind. Inside were 2 sheets of paper and a photo. The photo was old. It was Tony and Jeremy, laughing at some beach, their arms around each other like brothers. I unfolded the letter, and what I read nearly dropped me to the floor. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here." That was the first line of the letter. And from the second sentence on, my breath caught in my throat. Tony knew everything. Not just about that night, but about the weight I had been carrying. The loneliness, the silent agony, the slow drowning that neither of us could stop. "Ruth, I saw it in your eyes long before you ever stepped out of this house. I knew you were grieving me while I was still breathing. That is what this disease does. It turns the people we love into strangers, long before death comes for the body. I never hated you, not for a second. I hated what was happening to us. I hated what I was putting you through. And yes, I knew it was Jeremy." I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. The man I betrayed had forgiven me before I even asked. But what came next broke me all over again. Jeremy and I were like brothers. But he never had the courage to face hard things. I knew once I was gone, he would disappear. And I hated that you would be left with nothing but guilt. So, here is my last gift to you. Forgive yourself. You are human in a moment of unbearable pain. You do not need to wear that moment like a life sentence. And then, at the very bottom, he wrote, "You are the greatest love of my life. I hope one day you can say the same about yourself." The next morning, I stood in front of his casket with the weight of that letter inside my purse and a silence inside my soul that screamed louder than any church hymn. People said I looked strong, but they did not see the shards under my skin. Jeremy never came to the funeral. He never called, never wrote, and I never searched for him. I did not need closure from him. Because Tony had given me more than that, he gave me understanding. Grace. The kind of forgiveness that rewires the soul. But the shame? It stayed. Quiet. Heavy. Present. In the months that followed, I went back to work part-time at the library. I started therapy. I learned how to breathe without sobbing. I stopped looking at myself as a villain and started seeing a woman who simply broke under the weight of love and loss. Do I regret it? Yes. Would I do it differently if I had another chance? Absolutely. But life does not give us rewinds, only lessons. And mine is this: grief is not always black and white. Sometimes it bleeds into places it should not go. Sometimes it makes you do the unthinkable. But it never means you are unlovable. It just means you were hurting. So, if anyone out there has ever done something they cannot explain during a storm, know this. You are not alone. I still visit Tony's grave every week. I sit beside the headstone, run my fingers across his name, and whisper 3 words over and over. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. And somewhere in the stillness, I hear him say them back. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I truly hope it touched something real in you. Please drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Do not forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay human.